I loved Peter for 10 years. He kicked away my child without batting an eye. It was good that the child was gone, saving me another trip to the hospital. That night, I lay on the cold operating table, ready to give up on life. Peter, who never believed in God, completely broke down in front of the church. As long as Daisy could live, I would give my life to her. Peter came to my apartment, his face flushed with alcohol. Daisy, I have a child now. I subconsciously touched my stomach, which was empty and deflated. I almost forgot. I also had a child once, 3 months in, forced to abort by Peter. My eyes became hollow, sitting on the bed in a daze, without saying a word. Peter was disgusted by my lifeless appearance. He often said, "This is what Daisy owes me. Why do you feel wronged?" Tonight, he was perhaps a little too drunk. He didn't harass me. Instead, he patiently held me in his arms and gently said, "Daisy, I hope to have a daughter with you." With me? What does his child have to do with me? I couldn't help but laugh, a lonely laugh. Peter, I want a child too. I want to get married. Peter froze in unbuttoning his shirt. He took a cigarette from the pack, lit it in his mouth, puffing out smoke, taking a deep drag. Suddenly embracing me, all the smoke blew into my face, choking me madly cough. He bent his eyes, smiling, "You too." After saying that, Peter casually left. With a pale face, I sat on the windowsill, sitting through the long dark night until dawn. The next day, as soon as I arrived at the office, an unexpected guest awaited me. The pretty girl who had just hooked up with Peter, holding a cup of coffee. As if to splash it on my face, I subconsciously raised my hand to defend myself. The scalding coffee spilled all over me, burning painfully. Seeing cold sweat seeping from my forehead, she looked pleased. "Daisy, if you seduce Peter again, it won't be coffee next time." This wasn't the first time. I had been warned by one of Peter's women. In the past, I would fight back, but now, I was terrified, and so were the other colleagues. When a woman came looking for me, they gathered around to watch the show, enjoying my embarrassment, because everyone looked down on me. In their eyes, I was Peter's hidden mistress at the company, a secret to be kept in the dark. But they didn't know that Peter and I were each other's first love. We had been together since high school. What are they doing there during work hours? When Peter arrived at the company, his short hair slightly disheveled by the wind, standing in the shadow outside the door, looking like someone not to be messed with. Peter, the girl who had been provoking me a second ago, immediately changed her tune, sweetly calling out to Peter. Ignoring their flirting, I wanted to quietly retreat. "Why are your hands so red? Go put some medicine on them." Following the voice, I noticed the presence of a very cold man standing beside Peter. I gave him a nod of thanks, intending to leave. "Stop." Peter halted me, his expression growing even more hostile. He took a few steps towards me, fiercely grabbing my scalded arm. I cried out in pain. "Am I allowing you to leave? Clean up this place." Seeing him treat me this way, the woman leaning on him smiled triumphantly. Finally at peace. I had always said that I was the person Peter hated the most, but why wouldn't she let me go? Peter doted on that woman. That night, he brought her to my apartment. They kissed on my bed. I discreetly closed the door behind Peter. As the door closed, leaving only a crack, Peter seemed to sense something and stopped. He commanded me, "Daisy, the coat is worn out. Go buy me a new one." I numbly nodded. When they left the next day, I numbly returned to the room, seeing the rumpled bedsheets. I ran to the bathroom, violently vomiting, almost spitting out bile. Besides despair, I felt nothing else. "Daisy, are you tired of living?" Peter viciously pinched my neck, speaking harshly. "Who gave you the courage to spy on me?" I sent the photos of Peter and that woman to his wife. His wife was heartbroken, so he wanted to punish me. I spoke between coughs, trying to sound firm. "Don't bring women to my house again, Peter. I don't want that." Just before I suffocated, Peter let go of me, disdainfully chuckling. "Don't want it." "Daisy, don't tell me you still like me." I bit my lip tightly, looking helpless and pitiful. He grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. "One word at a time. But I loathe you. The thought of being with you disgusts me." My face instantly turned as pale as paper. Peter burst into a mocking laugh, with crimson flashing in his eyes. "Daisy, suffer well, repay what you owe me slowly." Through tear-blurred eyes, I saw him tenderly answering his wife's phone call. Then, without looking back, he left. I collapsed weakly onto the sofa, internally shattered. During the time Peter treated me coldly, I went to the hospital to visit his mother. She did everything herself, without any help. The new nurse praised me repeatedly. "Your daughter is so filial. She comes to the hospital to take care of you every few days." "This is my daughter-in-law." Peter's mother looked at me with a loving smile. I froze, opening my mouth, not knowing what to say. I knew she was confused due to her illness, not remembering anything. "Daisy, why didn't Peter come with you?" I said. "Peter is very busy with work. She seemed puzzled. Isn't Peter still in school? Why is he working now? I casually made up a reason. She was easily appeased and didn't continue to question, but as I massaged her, she suddenly asked, Daisy, where did your uncle go? Why hasn't he come to pick me up? I heard the sadness in her voice. I fought back tears, soothing her softly. Uncle will come to pick you up in a few days. You're lying to me. She suddenly turned around, her face twisted with fierceness. He's dead. He won't come back. I was stunned for a moment as Peter's mother picked up a fruit basket and smashed it on my head with all her strength. She remembered. My heart was pounding. She suddenly went hysterical. Get out. You are the daughter of a murderer. Get out. It felt like my feet were filled with lead, making it difficult to lift them. I stood there, bowing my head, willingly taking on all her anger. Before long, doctors and nurses rushed in, separating us. Seeing her sedated and lying unharmed on the hospital bed, I left like a zombie. Miss Daisy, wait. As I reached the corner, I heard a gentle male voice behind me. Realizing he was calling me, I stopped and turned around. I saw a young doctor standing in the corridor, wearing a white coat, tall in stature, with a cold and composed demeanor. He walked towards me, noticing the blood on my forehead. His brow furrowed. Let me take you to get that wound bandaged, he said. I remembered there were many healthcare workers coming to the ward, but he was the only one who noticed my injury. My mind slowly cleared, and I started to feel the severe pain on my head. It was as if the pain was making me more alert. I shook my head feebly, saying it wasn't necessary. He, as if having a professional obligation, took me to the neurosurgery department without allowing any refusal. Why didn't I hide? While he was treating my wound, he softly asked me. I seldom show emotions in front of strangers, but perhaps the pain from the stitching was too much that I couldn't help but clear my throat. I can't hide, I said. There's already someone hiding in my family. Even the police can't find him. I can't have a guilty conscience and run away. After he finished bandaging me, the doctor took off his gloves and patiently told me, standing still in one place will only cause you more harm. He removed his mask. Perhaps you can tell me, and I can try to help you figure things out. My eyes widened, tears welling up again. I realized he was the gentleman who helped me with my wound a few months ago at the company. This was the second time he kindly offered help to me. I tried to say something, but that's when I noticed the gaze from outside the window. It was Peter. Daisy, come with me. Peter came in with a menacing look and tightly grabbed my wrist, leading me out of the consultation room. Peter, don't treat her like this, the doctor said coldly, trying to stop him. When did you start meddling in other people's business, Johnny? Peter's temper flared up. In an instant, tensions rose, and the air became tense. I didn't want Johnny to get into trouble because of me. I spoke up to break the silence. Peter, I'll go with you. Peter raised an eyebrow, maintaining his grip on me as he left the room. I glanced back at Johnny. Peter noticed and smirked coldly. What? You have a thing for Johnny now? Even though he no longer loved me, he wanted to interfere in whether I liked someone else, even if I didn't. I didn't want to explain. My silence completely angered him. He harshly pressed on the freshly stitched wound on my head, laughing coldly. Daisy, what can you do if you like him? Who would like a secretary warming a bed? I bit my lip, remaining silent despite the pain. He dragged me into the car as if he were crazy, roughly pushing me over. He drove off. Peter, don't touch me, please. Not here. I begged as my whole body trembled, my voice hoarse from crying. Peter seemed to sober up a bit and tossed me into the backseat. The atmosphere inside the car became extremely oppressive. Suddenly, a couple in school uniforms appeared in my line of sight. The boy was riding a bike with the girl wearing ponytails. He looked at her tenderly, and she had a happy look on her face, the wind lifting their school uniforms like sails in the summer. Peter stopped the car. We gazed foolishly at the young couple's backs. The traffic lights blinked on and off, and the shadow of the student couple disappeared into the night. In that moment, I truly realized that some things, once lost, could never be regained. Peter, let's go our separate ways. I spoke almost subconsciously, my voice soft and nasal. He turned back in disbelief, his face turning ominously dark. Tears streamed down my face, and I said, I'll repay what I owe you in a different way. I want to live a normal life. Peter abruptly opened the car door and threw me out like trash, almost roaring. He questioned me. Daisy, your dad killed my dad. My dad wouldn't have died if it wasn't for your dad hitting him and throwing him into the lake. My mom went crazy after seeing my dad's body, her mental state becoming unstable. Our family fell apart because of what your family did. Your dad fled in fear, and he's still not caught. How can you, the daughter of a murderer, have the right to live a normal life? Tell me, what gives you the right? I was left speechless by his outburst. Peter left me on the side of the road, his phone in his car, making it impossible for me to get a ride back. As I walked back to my apartment, My feet were covered in blisters. Due to a high fever, I spent a week lying in the apartment. My mom thought I couldn't take care of myself. So when I recovered, she anxiously arranged a blind date for me. I heard the other party was a doctor with excellent conditions and caring personality. I was about to refuse, but my mom sighed, "Daisy, I'm getting old. My biggest wish is to see you get married. As long as you're not married, my heart is unsettled. I'm afraid that if I suddenly die one day, you'll be alone, and then I won't even be able to close my eyes." My mom's words grew more serious and urgent. After thinking for a while, the other party had good conditions in all aspects, and they might not even be interested in me. Just to appease my mom, I reluctantly agreed. "Send me the address." Johnny. As I looked at the man sitting across from me in the restaurant, I was surprised to see that my blind date was actually Johnny, the man who had helped me twice before. "What a coincidence," I said, smiling at him. He tilted his head and imitated my smile, saying, "Not a coincidence, Daisy. I agreed to this blind date once I knew it was you." My heart skipped a beat. I was somewhat at a loss. Is there someone in this world specially here for me? We hadn't even made formal introductions yet. He extended his hand, his gaze filled with warmth. As I looked at his hand, I hesitated whether to shake it or not. Suddenly, Peter appeared with a cigarette in his mouth. Peter stood in front of me, his gaze sharp and dangerous. Next, looking at Johnny, "You here for dinner?" Johnny met my gaze without avoiding it. "Blind date, how about it?" "I'm quite satisfied." With a slight smile on his face, Johnny looked into my eyes and said calmly, "I wonder if Miss Daisy is satisfied with me." Before I could respond, Peter's face turned completely cold. He spoke up first. "Your taste is not that great." This sentence instantly dropped the atmosphere to freezing point. I pursed my lips, feeling quite low. "The girl I liked. She was the best girl in the world." Johnny gently spoke up, his words resounding. I widened my eyes, looking at him in disbelief. He chuckled softly, looking at me with confidence. Warmth gradually enveloped my heart. Suddenly, Peter sneered, "The best girl." He approached me, gripping my chin with one hand, mocking, "You mean Daisy?" When she was in college, I slept with her every time without protection. Oh well, she would obediently take pills. One time she forgot. So I took her to the hospital to have an abortion. I felt like I could hear my brain crashing. I was completely speechless. I sat there stiffly, feeling as if my heart turned to ashes. Peter, getting agitated, with veins popping on his forehead, challenged Johnny. "She's nothing but a withered flower. Do you still want her?" Johnny smiled gently. "I won't marry anyone but her." This angered Peter, his face turning red. "You want to marry Daisy? Forget about it. Daisy is a living person, not some object for you to play with. Peter, please respect her. It's none of your business to interfere in our affairs." Johnny turned to me, looking at me sincerely. "Daisy, choose for yourself, okay?" I opened my lips, wanting to speak, but Peter's phone suddenly rang, interrupting me. After listening to the call, he looked a bit flustered. "Daisy, there's an issue with your responsibilities at work. We need to go back to the office." My mind was buzzing as I was forced to leave with him. As I turned away, I saw Johnny's eyes dim in that moment. I quietly lowered my head, feeling uneasy. When I came to my senses, I asked Peter, "What happened with the work?" Peter didn't reply. The car continued driving. After a while, he casually asked, "If I hadn't mentioned the work issue, would you have come with me today?" "No, I wouldn't." After hearing my answer, he slammed on the brakes. Turning to me, he looked bewildered and lost. I calmly met his gaze, with no ripples in my heart. In that moment, I realized I might not love him anymore. Since then, Peter and I fell into a cold war. He shifted me to a different position, no longer making me accompany him to social events. I was left in the project team, working day and night. After a few weeks, not only did my dark circles deepen, but something more terrifying happened. My hormones were out of balance. My period was late. I took sick leave with Peter. He looked at me with a complex expression. On the way in the car that time, "Did you take the pills?" His words struck like thunder out of a clear sky, leaving me stunned. I closed my eyes, feeling increasingly anxious. Ignoring him, I quickly took a cab to the hospital. The doctor moved a device across my belly, making me tense up. After a few minutes, she finally stopped, pointing at a spot on the screen. She said to me, "You're pregnant. This is your child, currently very healthy, but your uterine wall is too thin, prone to miscarriage. Many women are unable to conceive again after a miscarriage. You must be careful." I stared at the screen in disbelief, my mind blank. My heart suddenly stopped beating. I even forgot to breathe. 2 years ago, before Peter got married, I had been pregnant before, anxiously and joyfully. I told Peter about the news. He casually replied, "You don't have to tell me if you have a child in the future. Take care of it yourself." My heart shattered into pieces. This was my first baby. I instinctively protected him. I didn't want to give up on him. Peter, please, don't treat the baby this way, okay? Peter responded word by word. Daisy, your child is despicable. He doesn't deserve to live in this world, got it? My blood stopped flowing, and I stiffened, covering my ears. I didn't want the baby to hear curses from his biological father. It's too pitiful to be Daisy's child. He hadn't even been born yet. And he suffered so much. I couldn't let him go through the same torment as me. When I was crying miserably, I finally convinced myself. I went to the hospital with Peter for the surgery. Later, I lay in bed for a month, constant high fever, sleepless nights. Even if I managed to fall asleep, I would hear the baby in my dreams asking, Mom, I'm good. Don't give up on me, okay? Why don't you want me? I hate you. I got up from bed, sat on the windowsill, holding my head, crying uncontrollably, unable to stop. At that moment, I wanted to die. When I was in my most painful moments, where was Peter? He casually informed me, Daisy, I'm getting married. From that moment on, I utterly despised him, and then, I started paying attention to the company's tax returns. But fate had a cruel sense of humor. Just as I was about to give up on Peter and make a comeback, I found out I was pregnant with his child. What made it worse was if I miscarried again, I wouldn't have a chance to be a mother in this lifetime. I didn't know how I got back home. I didn't know how Peter's wife got in. She sat on my couch, with the demeanor of a hostess. Daisy, I've been waiting for you for a long time. My eyes involuntarily glanced at her round belly. I heard she was close to giving birth. Peter was looking forward to this child. Do you have time to chat? Her voice brought me back to reality. I weakly smiled. What do you want to talk about? Peter hasn't been home for a long time. Have you been together all this time? The company had just taken on a new project, and had been quite busy. So everyone had to stick together day and night. Does the project need to be done in bed? Ms. Helen, please watch your emotions. I looked at her belly and patiently explained that not only I and the boss were working overtime during this time, the whole project team was also working late. If you don't believe me, you can ask others. Helen sneered a few times. Daisy, do you really think I don't know what kind of relationship you have with Peter? I looked darkly at her, saying nothing. She looked haughty. You're just a mistress who can't stand in the light. Do you know why I didn't take care of you? Because countless women threw themselves at Peter, and I found it exhausting to deal with each one of them. Peter is a man. You let him take advantage and he won't suffer. But you shouldn't push your luck and cling on to Peter. She took out her phone and blatantly took a picture of my face. Daisy, do you want to force my husband to divorce me and marry you? I smiled wryly, replied calmly. Helen, the one who has been harassed is me, not Peter. Also, Peter and I have been together since high school, and this year marks our 10th year together. When we haven't broken up yet, he married you. The one who deserves the title of mistress is you, not me, Daisy. I didn't want to engage in meaningless arguments with her. So I lowered my voice. Helen, the one who has betrayed me is Peter. This man is the main culprit, and both you and I are victims. So, you should be questioning Peter, not coming here to act tough. Helen widened her eyes, her lips trembling, as if she couldn't believe it. It's impossible. Peter couldn't possibly do that to me. I shook my head and looked blankly out the window. I didn't even notice when she left. I walked to the balcony, looking at the pitch-black sky, my heart in turmoil. The phone rang for a long time before I finally answered. It was my mom calling. After answering the phone, my mom cried non-stop, her voice hoarse and unable to stop. Daisy, your dad has been found. The phone slipped from my hand and fell to the ground. It felt as if thunder had struck my head, and I stumbled back, falling onto the cold floor. A buzzing sound echoed in my ears. My blood rushed to my head, and I gasped for air, trying to calm myself down, but I just couldn't. I crouched on the floor, crying wildly, gasping for air, until eventually, I couldn't even shed tears. The person who caused all my suffering has finally been found. I slowly wiped away my tears and finally smiled. The pitch-black sky outside seemed to brighten at that moment. Sitting there alone, I made a decision. The person who shattered Peter's family will come back. That person will surely face legal consequences. An eye for an eye. As for me, I have been paying my debt of 6 years. This time, I will definitely part ways with Peter. Daisy, open the door. Suddenly, Peter's knocking at the door. Afraid of complaints from neighbors, I reluctantly opened the door. It was raining outside. Raindrops fell heavily, creating a humming sound in the world. The air felt heavy. Peter came in through the door, against the light. I couldn't see his expression. I sat calmly on the sofa and told him straightforwardly, Peter, we can completely separate now. Peter visibly hesitated, loosening his tight tie as if struggling to breathe. The air pressure in the room dropped even further. I pushed forward urgently. The police have found that person, the law will not let him off, so what? So you want to retaliate against me? Peter clenched his fists, his voice getting louder. Go to the hospital and see what you did to Helen. I looked up in bewilderment, not understanding. What happened to Helen? What are you pretending? Peter suddenly pushed me, and I fell to the floor, with him towering over me. You forced me to have an abortion, so now, you want to plot to kill my child and then walk away, he said in bits and pieces. And I could guess that his wife was in the hospital. I curled up on the cold floor, my chest heaving severely. Peter, the person who hurt Helen isn't me. I struggled to breathe. The one who hurt me is you. Cold sweat as small as beans poured down uncontrollably. My stomach felt a piercing pain, trembling in every limb, holding my stomach. I cried silently, Peter, I'm pregnant. Fresh blood kept flowing from underneath me, and I was covered in red. This is my last child, the doctor said. I smiled gently. Peter, are you satisfied now? Peter's pupils shrank, his lips trembling. How are you pregnant? The intense pain made me wail uncontrollably. I clutched my stomach, instinctively calling for my mom, sobbing loudly, Mom, it hurts so much. He subconsciously reached out to hug me, but then turned away, his voice as cold as an ice cellar. It's good that the child is gone. Saves you from having another abortion at the hospital. In that moment, my heart turned to ashes, and I stopped struggling. The room fell quiet, the only sound being my breaths. In just a second, Peter suddenly lost control and lifted me, heading to the door. Daisy, you can't. God has never favored me. Every time I see hope, I am struck heavily by it. God, do you know? I, who was once broken, also wanted to live well. Resisting you is just too exhausting. God, I surrender to you. I slowly closed my eyes, giving up on survival. Daisy, can you talk? Please don't do this. I was wrong. I was wrong. I promise you. I won't let anything happen to the child. Daisy, he pleaded, seeming to be fooling both me and himself. You'll be okay. He cried, his tears falling on my face, his voice so lonely. Daisy, please don't fall asleep. Peter, you finally understand my despair. After arriving at the hospital, Peter collapsed, shouting loudly, Doctor, please, save my wife. No matter how much he cried, my heart remained as calm as a dead water. In the emergency room, the doctor solemnly said, she was already at risk of a miscarriage and now experiencing heavy bleeding. The baby won't make it, and her own life is in serious danger. We need to proceed with surgery immediately. Peter knelt on the ground, completely devastated. A scene flashed through his mind. In high school, the class was watching a movie. Peter turned to look at me, the orange hues of the setting sun shining on his face, making him look even gentler than the sunset itself. On the big screen behind, the classic lines of the main characters were playing out. The smile on Peter's face grew wider. Suddenly, he leaned in, looked at me intently, and spoke the lines of the male lead. It was in that moment that I fell in love with Peter. The sunset quietly descended upon us, and we shared a smile. But now, my sky will never be bright again. After Daisy passed away, I went to her apartment alone. In her drawer, I found a few diaries. I read through them in tears. Daisy grew up in an unfair family environment. When she was born, her father was displeased, asking her mother, how could you give birth to a girl? Her mother, a housewife who dared not speak up, even complained about why the baby wasn't a boy. No one loved her at home, and even her name was casually chosen. In her hometown, the streets were filled with daisies every May, the season she was born. Her father pointed to the flowers in front of their house and said, let's just call her Daisy. Daisy's father worked as a taxi driver in another city, and often lived apart from her mother. When her father didn't come home for Chinese New Year for several years, her mother took her to find him. You have someone else outside. You must let Mom and your daughter stand in front of you and look at you. Her mother insisted on not getting a divorce. Her father beat and scolded them, but in the end, allowed them to live with him. Luckily, Daisy excelled academically and was soon admitted to a good school. That's where she met Peter. Later, Daisy transferred to the local high school. Peter was her desk mate, handsome and from a well-off family. He was a prominent figure in school. Daisy was not good at socializing, a bit insecure, always writing in her notebook after class. They were like two parallel lines that would never meet, each on their own path. But Peter was the class monitor. He insisted on integrating Daisy into the new school and helping her solve various problems using the excuse of being responsible. He even complimented Daisy on her lovely name. He taught Daisy to be confident. As they grew closer, Peter made Daisy call him boss. Daisy felt uncomfortable, but she wouldn't say it. Peter's brother sat on the side teasing, just call him. He's not forcing you to call him husband. That day, Daisy's heart was about to explode. She glanced at Peter, only to see his face turning red as well. From then on, She could clearly feel that things were different between her and Peter. Peter would bring her breakfast, accompany her on runs, help her with physics, and they would wish upon stars together. They planned to attend the same university, but neither of them confessed their feelings. It wasn't until the last day of winter break that Peter handed her a love letter. "Daisy, can you deliver this to the girl in the other class?" She picked up the love letter without questions and delivered it for him, but tears streamed down her face the whole way, unknown to Peter. Daisy ignored Peter for the entire winter break. Upon returning to school, Peter, upset, asked her why she was ignoring him. Daisy thought to herself, "You are interested in someone else. So I decided to distance myself from you." I sighed, wondering how the fiercely proud Daisy eventually forced herself to become Peter's warm secretary. That day, Peter was furious. That night, he forcibly stopped Daisy outside the dormitory building. Then, in a low voice, he apologized. "Daisy, if you're angry, you can hit me. Just don't ignore me, please." Seeing how the usually proud Peter was now so humble, Daisy's eyes turned red for some reason. She muttered softly, "I didn't want to deliver your love letter that time." Peter suddenly realized what was going on with the girl he loved. He immediately explained that the letter was written by his brother. He said his brother came up with the idea for Daisy to deliver the letter to see if she truly liked him. And he made Daisy angry. Full of remorse, he eventually realized his mistake. Staring at Daisy, he asked, "Daisy, are you jealous?" At that moment, his eyes were like the stars in the sky. No one could lie to the stars. So, Daisy nodded in agreement. Peter was so excited, a bit incoherent, holding his hands up, unsure where to put them. Finally, he touched her head, gently saying, "Hello, girlfriend." Back in the dormitory, Daisy splashed her face with cold water several times, her cheeks still burning. That night, she had a boyfriend. After being with Peter, he would often take her on walks in the park. When she got too tired to walk, he would carry her. At first, Daisy would shyly cover her face, but eventually she let Peter do whatever he wanted without reservations. They passed their high school days happily and passionately. During their senior year of high school, Daisy had to return to her hometown to study and was reluctantly sent back home by Peter, as her father sternly told her that the money he spent was for her education, not for her to engage in a romance. After hurling various insults at her, her father suddenly asked if the boy, Peter, came from a good family. Daisy thought about all the unique gifts Peter had given her and nodded. Her father's demeanor changed immediately. "You should keep in touch with this boy, girl. Studying won't get you anywhere, even if you go to a good university and find a decent job. It's not as good as marrying well. I've invested so much in you, it's all accounted for. And you will have to pay it back in the future." Daisy felt suffocated by her father's words. She despised him. She didn't want to become a parasite on Peter. She wanted to study hard, get into a good university on her own merits, find a good job, and strive for a bright future. Daisy wanted to be her own solid support, not relying on anyone else. Eventually, Daisy returned to her original city and attended the same university as Peter. The two of them became a well-known exemplary couple on campus. Those who knew them said, "If Peter and Daisy don't get married, there will be no true love in this world." Daisy firmly believed this. From high school to university, this year marked their 4th year together. Having surpassed the honeymoon phase long ago, but they were still deeply in love every day, knowing each other's preferences. They were so happy that even the heavens were envious. Suddenly, a shocking tragedy completely shattered them. One day, while having lunch, Daisy received a call from her mother. Daisy was puzzled and asked what had happened. Her mother said that her father had caused a hit-and-run accident while driving under the influence, taking away all the family savings and running away with his mistress. Her mother blamed Daisy. "If only you were a son, your father would never have abandoned us." Daisy couldn't even cry. She never imagined her father could cause such a huge disaster, hit and run. A crime she never dared to think about. Trembling, she asked her mother about the condition of the person who was hit. The answer shook her even more. Her father didn't want to take responsibility, so he threw the man into the lake. In that moment, Daisy felt like her world collapsed. Her father had no education, didn't understand the law, and was ignorant in every way. She recalled an incident from when they were living in their hometown. Her father had been in a car accident before and killed a large dog. Daisy was terrified, and she cried and begged her father to bury the dog. But her father didn't care at all. He had no respect for life and cooked the dog before forcing Daisy to eat it. Refusing to comply, Daisy only ate vegetables for dinner. Her father laughed and asked if they were delicious. Daisy vomited all day, never touching meat again. Years passed, but her savage father remained unchanged. When he hit someone, his first thought wasn't to help, but to cover his tracks and maliciously submerge the victim in the lake. What if that innocent person was still alive? Daisy dared not think about it and immediately called the police. Shaking with fear, she dialed Peter's phone number. No response. Daisy was filled with anxiety as no one answered. In the evening, Peter finally picked up. Daisy was in tears. "Peter, where are you? I want to see you." Peter's voice on the phone was hoarse and hard to understand. Daisy took a long time to comprehend. Peter's father had been hit by someone and his body was thrown into the lake. A few days later, Peter returned to school, hugged Daisy, and wept. It was the first time Daisy had seen Peter cry. She dared not move, holding Peter and crying with him. Peter was vulnerable and shattered. "Daisy, my father is gone. What should I do? My mother will go crazy when she finds out." Daisy had met Peter's parents. His father was kind, his mother gentle. Knowing Daisy was Peter's girlfriend, they not only didn't look down on her poor background, but respected and cared for her enough. Daisy couldn't accept their affection, but the gentle aunt patiently assured her that from now on, she was part of their family. The aunt liked her very much and hoped Peter would marry her soon. The uncle said, "If Peter ever mistreats Daisy, I will break his legs." Peter retorted, "If I mistreat Daisy, you won't have to do it, Dad. I will break my own legs." But that atmosphere was no more, all destroyed by Daisy's father. Daisy hated her father and herself. Why was she the daughter of such a beast? Not long after, Peter learned the truth. He angrily questioned Daisy. "Why was it your father? Why did it have to be your father?" He broke down in tears. "The coroner said my father drowned. If your father hadn't heartlessly thrown him into the lake, my father would still be alive, Daisy. From now on, consider me a stranger. If you ever show up in front of me again, I will not spare you." Daisy's father killed such a good uncle for her. He drove the gentle aunt insane. After that, the savage man disappeared. Daisy couldn't be like her father, callous and heartless. She couldn't hide, yet couldn't face reality. She was overwhelmed with guilt. She stubbornly stayed by Peter's side, even if he hurt her again and again, told her to leave. She wouldn't. She couldn't bear to see the once gentle and cheerful young man become the demoralized, world-weary one he was now. Finally, one night, she and Peter made love. Peter vented his emotions wildly, and she endured the pain. Despite everything, she still loved Peter deeply. After graduation, Peter started a business with some friends. Daisy joined their company and became Peter's loyal secretary. Peter continued to torment Daisy in various ways. Daisy endured it all with the love she held for him before. After all, they had truly loved each other for 4 years. If it weren't for that accident, they would have been married by now. When did Daisy start to hate Peter? I think it was 2 years ago. The day Peter married me, she hated him. She wished she could kill him. I suddenly remembered, on the day I married Peter, he pronounced the bride's name wrong. "My name is Helen," he said. "Daisy, will you marry me?" In fact, I knew Peter didn't love me. Our marriage was just an accident. When I was traveling, I bought some flowers locally, thought they were beautiful, and proudly wore them on my head. Peter saw this gesture. He asked for my contact information. Later on, we interacted calmly, and inexplicably got married. Looking back now, he truly loved Daisy, but he couldn't get over himself. Dad was murdered, Mom went insane, and the killer fled. The most fatal thing was, that damn killer was the biological father of the woman he loved the most. Who wouldn't hate? Who wouldn't hate? But, what did Daisy do wrong? After marrying Peter, I knew Daisy was the woman who spent the most time by his side. At first, I didn't know about the 10 years of entanglement between her and Peter. I thought she, like other women, was striving to rise to a higher status. Even though Peter and I each did our own things, not interfering with each other, but I couldn't allow my multi-billionaire husband to be taken away by someone else. So, with a bulging belly, I confronted Daisy with great momentum. That day, I saw Daisy for the first time. She was too thin, with hardly any flesh on her body, as if a gust of wind could blow her away. She looked up at me, with a lingering sadness in her eyes. I stared at her fiercely and scolded her well. She answered calmly, striking a blow to my soul. She said she had been with Peter for 10 years, yet Peter married me. But she had never resented me, as fellow women, because the main culprit was Peter. We were all victims. At that moment, I suddenly realized. I even felt a bit unable to lift my head. The one who did wrong was obviously the man. Why did I, without even thinking, want to blame Daisy for Peter's infidelity? In a daze, I went home, and coincidentally Peter was there. I confronted him directly. "Let's get a divorce," Peter, without even lifting an eyelid, said. "Okay." His arrogant attitude thoroughly angered me. I scolded him. "Peter, you are truly hypocritical. You never actually loved me." He remained unaffected. I sarcastically exposed him. "You love Daisy, don't you?" He suddenly raised his head. "What does Daisy have to do with anything? Don't go looking for her." Peter's response made my stomach ache with anger. My waters broke. I was taken to the hospital. Peter received a call, turned and went to Daisy's house. The call was from the police station. The authorities informed Peter that the animal had been caught. Peter was afraid that if Daisy found out, he would cut ties with her decisively. So he rushed to Daisy's house, not letting her leave. Sure enough, as soon as Daisy saw him, she initiated a breakup. He deliberately changed the subject, using me to provoke Daisy. In the intense argument between the two, Daisy was pushed by him. He belatedly realized that Daisy was pregnant. The child didn't make it. Daisy bled heavily and couldn't be saved. The doctor told Peter. She had a week will to survive. We did our best. Peter knelt down in remorse, willing to trade his life for hers. However, Daisy couldn't come back. After Daisy's death, I questioned myself. If that day I hadn't argued with Peter, would I still have ended up in the hospital? Would Peter not have used me as a reason to harm Daisy? Would Daisy still be alive? Daisy, I'm sorry. The day Daisy passed away, I happened to give birth to a daughter. I named her Candy. I hope that her life will be as sweet as Candy. The father of this child is not Peter. That night Peter got drunk. He thought we had slept together, but we never did. I handed over the company's tax documents found in Daisy's house to the police. The next day, the police took Peter away. I liquidated all his assets, split into 3 parts. 1 part is kept for raising my daughter. 1 part is used to establish several Hope primary schools in Daisy's hometown. The last portion I handed over to Daisy's mother. Her mother and I talked a lot. She said her Daisy had always been obedient since she was young, but she didn't treat Daisy well. Raising Daisy didn't seem like raising her own daughter, but rather like raising someone else's daughter-in-law. She demanded Daisy to be obedient and virtuous. Daisy had to do a lot of housework from a young age, her hands covered with frostbite, and had to wash clothes in the icy river. After school, while other kids could play carefreely, Daisy couldn't. She had to cook. After preparing the meal, she would go to the nearby gambling house and call her mother back to eat. Later on, Daisy's father ran away with his mistress, taking away all the family's savings. When her mother was left with nothing, she finally remembered she still had a daughter. That was when their relationship slowly started to improve. I couldn't listen any longer. I cried and said, "Auntie," before Daisy died. She was calling for her mom. "Auntie, you owe her an apology." Daisy's mother sat down, clutching her heart, crying in anguish. I went to visit Peter in prison. His haggard appearance made it hard for me to recognize him. I sighed, trying to calm myself down. I said, "Peter, the company's tax returns were found in Daisy's apartment." "I know. I submitted them. Daisy didn't have a chance to retaliate against you, so she sent me instead." Peter remained silent. I continued, "I found some diaries at Daisy's house." Peter looked up, his voice hoarse. "Where are the diaries?" I smiled unchanged. "I burned them." Peter suddenly stood up. The nearby police officers quickly restrained him. His eyes were bloodshot, struggling desperately, howling like a lonely beast. I left casually. Outside the prison, the bright sky was truly beautiful. Johnny's epilogue. I met Daisy in the hospital. She often came to visit Peter's mother, and over time, most of the doctors taking care of Peter's mother had gotten to know her. Many doctors privately praised her, saying Peter had married a good daughter-in-law. When the doctors familiar with Peter mentioned that he was already married, but not to Daisy, everyone's expressions changed instantly. But I was curious about what she had been through, why there was always a hint of unshakable sadness in her demeanor. I took the initiative to get closer to Peter. I told him about his mother's condition, and since we were of similar age, we quickly became friends. One day, Peter invited me to visit his company. There was a domineering woman in the company who was bullying Daisy. Daisy seemed to be accustomed to it. I noticed her swollen arm, and couldn't help but remind her to apply some ointment. This action made Peter immediately angry. He stood between me and Daisy, viciously berating her. I suddenly realized that if I got closer to Daisy, Peter would only intensify his mistreatment of her. The second time I witnessed Daisy getting hurt was in the hospital. I patiently persuaded her and helped her bandage the wound. She thanked me numerous times. I was really curious about what had happened to her. I tentatively asked her, but she didn't want to talk about it. I took off my mask, and she finally realized that I was the one at Peter's company who had reminded her to take care of her wound. She smiled gratefully. I continued to inquire, saying I could help her find a way out. She moved her lips as if wanting to say something. The next moment, Peter suddenly appeared and took her away. Daisy had a mysterious attraction to me. Whenever I had a moment to myself, I couldn't help but think of her. I made great efforts to arrange a meeting with her, but unexpectedly, Peter showed up again. It seemed no matter where Daisy was, Peter could find her. Peter seemed to know that I liked Daisy. He freely insulted her in front of me, using the most offensive language. In that moment, I was shocked. I couldn't understand how Daisy had endured so much suffering. I confronted Peter, saying I would only marry Daisy. Peter was furious and forcibly took her away. Since then, Daisy never contacted me again. The next news I heard about her was that she had passed away. She was killed by Peter. If I could go back to the day of our meeting, I would tell Daisy. The words Peter said only prove he is an animal. They can't prove anything else. Daisy, women's dignity isn't in their physical purity. You are the best girl forever. Daisy, you are true to yourself. It's them who are not true to you. Daisy, I'll take you away, far from Peter. It's a pity there are no IFS. Later, I heard that Peter committed suicide. He left everything behind, regretfully seeking Daisy. I knew he could always find Daisy, but how I wished Daisy would never have to meet Peter again.